What I want to do today, like if you are a parent, I would love to share some of our experience and see kind of maybe what has resonated with you and your experiences in this journey so far, or what differs from your experience. If you've like in that position where you're potentially starting a family, either in the immediate horizon or sometime far into the future, I really want to, share with you some of the things that have really inspired us, some of the perks, some of the challenges, the things we weren't aware of. And also, if you're not in either of those two situations or scenarios, then also what I'd like to do is give you a bit of insight into the kind of things that are on our mind as a family when we're traveling as a digital nomad. Because what we've really found, what Dan, my husband, and I have really found is that this lifestyle has allowed us to connect with people that we wouldn't necessarily connect with if we were living a regular city life. So, singles, couples, younger couples, older couples, people without kids, people with kids. And I think a part of that is due to, that shared common interest. We've all done something different. We've moved abroad or we're traveling. We've got something else to talk about other than the fact of, whether or not we have kids. But also a big part of it is just logistics, like the time constraints of living a city life with kids and knowing, okay, well, we've got to get back by 6 so we don't socialise with the people that go out at 7 or whatever. It's very different when you've got flexible work, your kids are homeschooled or whatever the situation is. I'm going to talk as I go through about what the flexibility is there. But you can go, yeah, sure, I just met these people at the farmers markets or down at the beach or in the surf. Come back, let's do a late dinner. The kids can be up late. We can wake up late, start work late, start schooling late. So it really, if you're not in either of those camps, parents or future parents, I think it still helps you to really build that connection and that community as a digital nomad as you're, building that international camaraderie. So, raising a family from anywhere. And my husband Dan and I have 3 little munchkins. They're 8, 7 and 3. That's 2 of them on the screen. And, the girls, our 2 oldest girls were 1 and 2 when we left Australia. So quite a while ago. And a couple of years later, our son Sean was born in Costa Rica. And before this happened, before we made this decision to pick up and leave our home country, Dan and I had each had that dream separately before we'd even met each other and before we'd had kids. So for Dan, my husband, it was at 23 when he was here in Thailand, visiting on the way through to London for the customary Aussie in London, adult gap year. And, for me, it was actually at the very same time. This is before we met, but we worked it out that, the seed had been planted for us at the same time. And it was where a business mentor had suggested that I actually put a dream book together, a physical cut and paste dream book. And I'd been searching for images of Bali, outdoor showers, beautiful tea tables in gardens. And I thought, oh my gosh, while everyone else is cutting and pasting Ferraris and, grand homes, I've got this wouldn't it be cool to have outdoor shower in Bali every day instead of doing the corporate routine, etc. So we'd had that dream separately, but when we met, we kind of chatted about it. It came up in conversation, obviously. We were like, oh, can you imagine what it'd be like if we, saved up some money and lived in Thailand for a year? Maybe we could figure out a way to sustain it. And when our first daughter came along, what happened is that we got swept up in the excitement of that, right? So we got a house in the suburbs, didn't buy it, but rented it, thankfully. But bought a whole house full of brand new furniture. My husband working extra hours to be able to pay for that. Getting everything ready to welcome this new little human into the world. And, when she came along, the exhilaration of that, there wasn't this little human before, and now here she is. There's 3 of us. I remember sitting at cafe tables and being like, oh, there's 3 of us. How did this happen? So, that was such an exhilarating time. And I know parents, would remember that feeling. And it carried us along. But what actually happened then is that as we got into that day-to-day city life of, we'd been used to having 2 incomes. We'd gone back to 1 income. Dan was working. I was at home with our oldest daughter. And 1 income, minimal sleep, which we weren't used to, of course. This is all the stereotypical things that you hear about, compounded by the fact of the financial downturn aligning around that time, late 2008, 2009, affecting my husband's work quite significantly. So whereas before we knew that he had this high, stable income, could get work at the drop of a hat, that became less predictable, and that became a challenge that was thrown into the mix of this. And what happened is that we started to feel really, really stuck. So, and I know that you can probably relate to this, parent or not, but we started to feel like our hands are tied. We can't make a move here. Like, if we try and get one side to line up and tweak the variables to make things feel better, it's going to throw something else out of whack. So to give you one example there, like, as a mother, if you've had a regular corporate or whatever job, retail, whatever it is, prior to becoming a mother, a full-time work, and you take maternity leave because your child is going to be arriving, it's kind of like you've got this timeline hanging over your head. It's a discussion that comes up in corporate offices. If you've heard women, pregnant women, or, older mothers talking about this, it's like, oh, how long have you got? Is it 6 weeks? Is it 3 months? Is it a year? And it's kind of like the holy grail if you've got a year, paid or unpaid maternity leave. This is in the old world, right? Not in this world we're living in, but that old frame of mind. And it just felt for me like there is no win here. Like, I've got this timeline to make this decision. Am I going to go back to work or aren't I? And neither of them felt like the Rubik's Cube was going to line up. And, for Dan as well, as his work started to change and not be so reliable, the enjoyment factor came out of it. And what he actually found was that he wanted to change his work. He started studying personal training, but we knew quite well that if he was to pursue that as a career, he would actually be halving his income. And of course, that throws the Rubik's Cube out. How do you have that financial stability, that comfort, that ability to go to the organic markets on Sunday if you're halving your income to follow your passion? So all these types of things. And there was one other thing. It was that, we're really, you start thinking about all these things as a new parent. What's my ideal, education options? And we'd looked at schools in the city, and there was a particular Montessori school that we were really excited about. I was doing crazy things, driving for an hour and a half across the city to get our little girls into the, the play group there, because that puts them in front of the line for getting into this particular alternative school. But I was sitting there in the Montessori school one day when they were little babies, and I was just going along with them to kind of familiarise them with it. And I was thinking to myself, I had this visualization. So I pictured myself, not being a full-time mum anymore, going back into the corporate world where I'd been previously, and doing this rush drop-off, and, the kids needing to attend after-school care, and the fees, and the fact that that would be required. And I was just like, this just does not compute. And that was where we're at. We were just trying to find solutions, and we couldn't get one to work. So what actually happened is that in this whole process, soon after becoming parents, about a year in, we had a massive health transformation. And what happened there is that I was pregnant with our second child. Our two girls are very close in age. They're 14 months apart. So if you do the math there, our oldest girl was 5 months when I found out that I was pregnant. And that requirement for nutrition can be significant. And what happened was I found myself at 7 months pregnant, severely fatigued. Not just tired, but I don't have chronic fatigue, but I can imagine it would be something similar to what that might feel like for people. And I was just asking for a solution. I was like, this just doesn't make sense. How am I supposed to care for my child? How am I supposed to even give birth in this state? And I was just desperately seeking for answers. And what I actually discovered, was the answer that was delivered was basically green smoothies. Okay, so common knowledge now, but back then in 2009 that would have been. Australia, my home country, wasn't like it is now. We can buy, green smoothie in any shop or supermarket you walk into. It was this kind of underground culture where it was being passed on in these one-on-one or private workshops in the back of health food stores or what have you. But anyway, so that was like, oh my gosh, there was a massive health transformation right away. My husband caught onto it as well as our 1-year-old daughter. And we started to be able to feel energy again, and like the Rubik's Cube was starting to come together, but there's still pieces to come into play. And after my daughter was born, I then said to my husband, our midwife, we'd had a home birth for my second child, and our midwife had sent me a raw food book because she was learning about raw food, and I was reading these testimonials. I was like, I know we're doing the green smoothies, but if we did this all the way, maybe we could just exist on 4 hours sleep and this would all be sweet. Which actually was what we did. So we were on the way to the markets, and I said, Dan, I'm just doing like 100% raw food this week. Like, you don't have to do it with me. And he's like, isn't it hard enough, But then he's like, okay, yep, all right, no worries. And of course, if you've ever tried that, like it had immediate, very impactful effects on us. And what basically happened was I was immediately able to exist on a lot less sleep, kind of handy when you have a brand newborn and a 1-year-old. My energy went through the roof, and, I used to have like this pain in my knuckles, and that feeling started to go away. I thought, oh, okay, maybe it's just because I'm getting older. I've got that arthritis feeling. That completely went away. My husband lost 20 kilos, which is about 44 pounds. 12 kilos of that was in like a few weeks, like 26 pounds or something like that in a few weeks. And his back pain and his knee pain from the construction industry, which we just thought, okay, we're getting closer to 30. That's just what happens when you're in the construction industry. You just get pain, uncomfortable and all that kind of thing. That completely went away. And this whole experience of digging into this, it seems like a kind of a common theme from what I'm hearing from a lot of people. The health transformation, whether it's before like it was for us or into your journey, it seems to correlate a lot with people that are looking to, create that optimal life for themselves. And so that is what happened for us, is that it happened before as the catalyst for us becoming digital nomads. And the process of digging into finding out about how this way of eating, we don't eat like that anymore, but it was there when it needed to be, and it's made us be able to troubleshoot our own health as we go along and take personal responsibility for our health. But that got us to finding out about a particular area of Costa Rica where we thought maybe there's this possibility that we could actually end up there, and that's what actually got us abroad. There was a couple of other catalysts in there, but a couple of years in, when we'd relocated, we'd left Australia, and we'd set up our online income after we'd left. I know a lot of people have done that similarly. And a couple of years in, when everything was starting to feel comfortable, okay, I know these skills, I know what our income's like, I know how to work with the clients, all that type of thing, I know what our structure is. We were feeling really comfortable with it. And I remember one day, like, sitting poolside and, at a resort, we'd gone there, like, for me to work on the laptop, and for Dan, it's easy for him to care for the kids with the pool, and having lunch together and having swims together. And, I was still working the whole day, but we were doing it in this totally different way. And I started reflecting on lifestyle design, and I started having that appreciation for it after the journey. And this particular quote on the screen, I stumbled on it. It's in a blog post called "The Matrix Explains Lifestyle Design," and it absolutely gave me spine tingles. It's like, this is the one that really, really speaks to me. Even now, I still, like, if I'm going through a challenge with business or whatever it is, this is the one that speaks to me. After you've broken your mental shackles, life can be what you make it. Sure, there are some unalterable rules, but don't let that stop you. Do you think that's air you're breathing? Learn the ropes. So for anyone, if the original Matrix is digging a little too far back into the memory banks, this, because I think it's 99 or something like that, but this is in reference to a scene in the Matrix where Morpheus, and that's played by Lawrence Fishburne, is speaking to Neo, Keanu Reeves, and he's in this simulated reality, and he's saying, look, the rules aren't what you think here. Some of these rules are able to be bent, and some of them can be broken. So if you want to act optimally in this environment, understand that. And he'd already directly tried to verbalize it to him. But then they'd gone into training, and Keanu, Neo, is, on his feet, on his bum, defeated in Kung Fu. And Lawrence Fishburne is trying to make the point in a more impactful way that's going to get through to his nervous system, into his core. And he says, do you think that's air you're breathing? Like, look up and look around. The rules are actually a lot more malleable than you believe them to be. And this particular quote, do you think that's air? You think that's air you're breathing? That was what I felt, and I remember feeling that sitting by the pool and working and thinking, oh my gosh, this isn't like a 1 week package deal family vacation that we're on here. This is our life. Like, this isn't some random day. We're doing this just because it makes life easy to get everything done in a day, for kids to be happy, for everyone to feel like they've had fun, and for us to have income coming in. And, that was the wake-up call. I felt like our health transformation was almost like being called out on our position of, struggle and defeat as a family when we were back in Australia. It's like, hey guys, like, you're finding this tough, but that's because you're trying to play by the rules. Like, get a grip, look around you. You can change things. And I feel like, as parents, when we become parents, there's kind of like this ingrained assumption in our Western culture that's, you've kind of got to pick one of two camps. So in the first camp, you have two parents working, you have two incomes coming in. That's going to allow you that financial stability, the ability to kind of, get the good things in life that you want for your kids. But you kind of know that if you're in that camp, you're going to sacrifice some things. You're going to sacrifice potentially time together as a family, connection, time with your kids. And then on the other hand, there's this other camp. We think, okay, well, if we're not doing that, we've got to do the other one. Okay, we have one parent working. We have one income coming in. And we know that that's going to mean we get some extra things. We get more time and connection together as a family. We've just got one parent that's leaving the house to work. But potentially we're going to sacrifice something there. So we're going to sacrifice, financial breathing space, or, potentially our sanity or what have you. There's going to be some sacrifice there. And so that quote, you think that's air you're breathing, what it said to me is basically like, neither of those two scenarios is necessarily the case. You can bend the rules. The rules are actually, about parenthood specifically, are a lot more malleable than what a lot of us have been brought up to believe. And the unalterable rules, from my perspective, is pretty simple. It's like basically comes down to, okay, we need food, water, and shelter for our family, and that means learning how to create an income, and we've done that through a flexible location-independent income, and connection and love with our kids. But the rest of it is up to us. We get to write the rules. And when we first started to, write the rules for our family, we definitely came upon some opposition. So let me share what I mean by that. This was my personal experience of the transition into parenthood. What I found is that, I've always been a little out of left field with my decision making, with my values, long before I was a digital nomad. I guess, a lot of you can relate to that as well. It was just the next extension of what's the next crazy decision I'm going to make. And as an individual adult, what I found is that, often you'll be asked to justify your decisions or your values. Oh, why are you eating like that? Why did you quit your job? Why are you doing these things? And you might choose to explain, engage, debate with someone, or you might not. You might just say, well, that's me and that's you. And what I found becoming a parent, becoming a mother, is that external pressure to justify your own values, it basically increases exponentially, even to the point where you need to actually enforce those values in a practical way. So I know that sounds a bit heavy, but that was definitely my experience of it. And so just a couple of quick examples, but there's countless of them. If you choose to have a baby in hospital, which we did for our first child, and you want to have that be a natural birth, then part of that process is going in with a very strong internal resolution and a willingness to say no, unwaveringly. And that's even if you're going into, a special section of a hospital that's designed for, natural birth programs, etc. And so I learnt that it's like, okay, you're going in and you're saying, this is my values, I have to say this. Or with a 2-year-old who's, at a party surrounded by people eating all kinds of crazy chips with crazy weird cheese flavouring, or weird cakes that can sit on a shelf, or what have you. And people are offering food. It's one of the things that people do with young children, and you're saying no. If you've got a cough, if it's just you, and someone says, oh, have you done something about that cough? They might be interested in the answer, or they might not. But if you have a child that's coughing quite badly, and someone says to you, oh, what are you doing about their cough? If you don't say that you've gone to the doctor, and instead you say, oh, we took them for a chiropractic adjustment and they've had a litre of green juice, check out the expression that you get from people that really care about that child as well. So as you get more certainty in your own values, of course, that opposition becomes less. But that's definitely what we found. And so it creates this real sense of pushing against. This was my experience. So pushing against all the things. So we've got that feeling of pushing against the conventional 9 to 5 because we want to connect with our families and be together. The things here, traditional education system, conventional medicine, processed and non-organic food, chemicals in, the baby clothes, the water, everything. And that real sense of pushing against was kind of what we were moving away from, looking for digital nomad lifestyle. We wanted to create this particular experience that relieved us of that need to justify our values. And so what happened was I was having this expectation that, okay, well, we're going to head off to Costa Rica and we're going to just live off the land and eat coconuts and bananas and pick wild greens, and the kids will be naked outside running around like little jungle fairies. And yes, that did happen. And it was actually really interesting. There was this one particular time where we were living on a permaculture farm, and the situation had happened that we had a neighbour who was a raw food vlogger, and we didn't realise, but they'd invited a couple of other raw food bloggers up who were hosting a collaborative retreat in Costa Rica. And we didn't know these people were going to come up, and it was just a regular day for us on the farm. I think we were wandering, 20 metres from the house. There was 5 rentals on this farm. And what happened is the tour group with all these people that were on this retreat learning about raw food down from the States, and these 2 bloggers and our friend who we already knew came by us, and the kids were naked, running around, picking wild greens. And it was super strange because one of the bloggers, not the person that knew us, but someone that didn't know us from, at all, made this comment like, oh, look at those kids. Like, isn't that incredible? I can't remember the exact wording, and I asked Dan, my husband, if he knew what the wording was. But it was that impression like, oh, look at these innate little kids. Like, oh, that's how life should be. And it was so incredibly strange to me because I was seeing like a vision of me through this person who I knew from a distance by reading their blog when we were back in Australia doing all that research. But I had this vision still in our heads of 6 months earlier, me rushing back from work in the central business district because we'd been trying to save money to get to Costa Rica, corporate suit, jacket, Dan having just picked up the kids from daycare, frazzled, the kids sitting in the car, my 1-year-old Ashley, who was still breastfeeding night and morning, desperately waiting for me to get into the car so I could get my suit jacket off and breastfeed her, and just that intensity going home to get up and do it all over again. So I still had this vision, but here was someone thinking that we're these innate living off the land people. And so it was really funny for me because what I realised is that digital nomad lifestyle for us is we moved right over into this don't want. And we actually had this opportunity to release the things that we were pushing against because of this new environment, new people, new values that we were surrounding ourselves with, and come back to centre. And that sense of pushing against really, made way for this feeling of just living life on our own terms. And that was a huge element of freedom for us. So I'll just have a look at the screen up here. So there's a couple of reasons for that. There was not so much opposition. What I mean by that is that, 95% of the people that we were coming into contact with were either, living life with very similar values to us, or just simply, busy living life on their own terms as well, in a different way, but not concerned with how we were doing it. And so that allowed us to step back and release, and not even just not opposition, but actually massive support. So if you had told me before we left Australia that I could be down at the beach with a handful of families, with no crazy food in sight, but just regular, nice gluten-free banana flour cake or whatever it was. A few questionable things in there, but not this crazy stuff that we're used to, in standard Western life. Talking about online marketing, talking about health, the dad's taking turns to surf, the mum's going off for walks. I wouldn't have believed that because in my mind I had this framework of like, okay, in Australia there's the play group with the organic mums, or there's the internet marketing seminars where I'm the odd one out, and I didn't realise that those worlds would collide. And it was actually a really incredible experience of gaining freedom that way as a family. And the other thing is, it's just funny, like little things, working with friends, other digital nomad families, and there was a homeschooled teenage girl who told me the story that her sister and my daughter, who was 6 at the time, were talking about, oh, my mum's doing a launch at the moment. Oh, my mum is too. So there was this conversation that goes on. And so we found ourselves where we were just, most of the time surrounded by our own values. And the other thing was that the possibilities are wide open. So when you have that ability to move into and out of different locations, what you do is you're basically opening up unlimited access to resources for yourself, but also for your kids to be in. So when they've got, unlimited access to nature play, the beach, unstructured learning, alternative education, self-guided learning, all those resources, that also released for me that sense of pushing against. Because, if your kids are outside all day running around in the jungle, do you really mind if they want to hop on Netflix and watch an hour of cartoons? Or if they say on the weekend, oh, we don't want to go to the beach, we want to go to the movies and the shopping mall? In Australia, I would have been always like, okay, we've all been at work all week in school, let's go to the national park on the weekend. But now we're able to blend our life and not just stick to dogmatic, like what we thought we had to do. So what I want to do is I want to share with you some of the things that people think about as a digital nomad family. Thank you. So schooling, first of all, the way that we approach it is basically blending it all together. It hasn't always been like that. We were searching for something before, and it changes based on where we are, the ages of the kids, and what resources we've got access to in those areas. So the schooling options as a digital nomad family, you've got homeschooling, big prominent one that people have on their mind when they think about that as a possibility for that flexibility. unschooling, where you're not directly guiding the process of children educating themselves. World schooling. Attending an online school where a teacher in perhaps your home country or another country is actually presenting online, kind of webinar style. They have special technology to do that. Attending an expat school, that could be like an official expat school or an unofficial expat school. We've definitely had the kids in these in different places that we've been in. Attending a local school, and also private tutoring. So just like the labels for the way that we describe our lifestyle are, subjective, interchangeable, there's no fixed boundaries whether we're a location independent or a digital nomad or a traveller or a slow traveller or an expat. Or as Jazzy was saying, a little more nomad, a little less digital. The same applies with schooling labels. There's no fixed area. It's just kind of pointing to the options that are available. But I hadn't actually realised, I obviously knew that homeschooling was an option, but I didn't realise the extent of the resources that we'd be able to draw on in terms of like expat schooling, even on an unofficial basis, where a collective of parents have gone, okay, let's have a little kindergarten in this area. And even if you're moving through, they're used to that. They're used to you being, okay, well, they're here for 3 months and then they're going, and your kids aren't the odd one out because that's what's happening. Oh, this person's going to Israel, that person's going back to France, that person's going to Germany, whatever it is. But one of the coolest things was figuring out that we didn't have to pick one. We didn't have to go, okay, we're world schoolers or we're unschoolers. Everything kind of blends together. And we were looking for that one thing. And then what we found is that when we're able to draw on these resources in the different areas, that's what really works for us as a family. That doesn't apply across the board. Some of the digital nomad families that are our very best friends are very much, okay, we're world schoolers or unschoolers, or, but for us, we like that eclectic approach. Even to this, when we're in Bali, my 3-year-old son was going to a great kindergarten while we were, an expat kindergarten while we were homeschooling the girls. And then here in Australia, Sean is getting to hang out with Dan while I'm working, and the girls are actually attending a public school in Australia for 3 months. So it's like really, blending up. I wouldn't have thought that was possible before I got into this. And the other thing that really surprised me was the private tutoring option. So when I say private tutoring, you might have visions of like, academic tutoring for someone that's fallen behind, or, really strict parents that are trying to prep their kids or what have you. But what I mean there by private tutoring is, if you think about the locations that you've been, a lot of the adults there, whether they're digital nomads or whether they're, travellers or expats, whatever it is, they all had to do some serious proactive thinking or proactive action taking to get in that position, right? And so what happens is there's a correlation with them having unique skills, passions, interests, and what they're able to do, like a lot of the time, that gets passed on to the community of children. So whether that be through an unofficial school or that person actually setting up their business. So, in Bali we had access to amazing art school. A great Singaporean teacher was like basically teaching classes. Her husband was teaching swimming, private lessons, silks in Costa Rica, yoga, meditation, permaculture, language, all different types of things. Because some of us are creating our income through online businesses, but we also run into a lot of people that are creating their income by using their skills on the ground in this way. And as a family, you're really able to draw on that for the benefit of educating your children. The other big thing here with schooling is that question comes up on your mind of like, do kids need that stability before they get to the school age? And really what I've observed, my opinion, just through our own kids and also the families that we've come into contact with, is there's no fixed right or wrong answer there, unfortunately. It's really down to the personal interests, like beliefs, life experiences of those children. And I've seen different things where kids have, their families tried to start this midway through their schooling, and maybe a young teenager is still, attached to their friends or what have you. But from our experience, our kids absolutely adore it. They love the fact that they're here doing this for 3 months and then they're there doing that. And I feel like the probability increases that you're going to pass on your beliefs when you've been doing it with your children from a young age, but that's not a hard and fast rule. But it's absolutely not something that traumatises our kids when they're like in that school and meeting these people, because all the people around them, the children, are actually in the exact same position, so they don't feel like they're the odd ones out. Even going to a public school in Australia, they don't feel like, they do know that they're the odd ones out, the fact that they're going there for a short time and leaving, but they love it. They kind of think that's novel. They take in Costa Rican money and impress everyone, or, they were Googling a YouTube video the other day and said, oh, where do you live? San Isidro, where we were in Costa Rica, and a YouTube video of Dan came up and the whole class was watching it apparently. So childcare is the other big one. I said the life-changing benefit of geo-arbitrage for young families. So as far as when people say, okay, well, that's okay to do it single, but as a family, I couldn't do that. It costs too much money. Is 5 more okay? Okay. Basically, we spend as much as we would in our home country now. We didn't right in the first year. Admittedly, granted, we can create more luxurious experiences than we could in our home country, stay in nicer hotels, eat out more often, all those types of things. But we spend the same. So it's totally doable, for people that don't want to, live in cheaper countries, so to speak. But this childcare has been a game changer for us as a family in terms of being able to build our businesses and build our financial stability at the same time as having that connection time with our kids that's not logistics time. And also to, for Dan and I to have our own personal fulfillment. This has been huge. And this woman on the screen, couldn't have built my business without her. She's in Costa Rica. She's not with us now, but obviously we'll see her when we go back there and that kind of thing. And it's not just local people that can help though. It's, there's likewise, again, the same as what I shared with private tutoring. There's people travelling through that aren't in this mindset of building an online business, and they're absolutely thrilled to jump at the opportunity. Yeah, I'll look after your kids a couple of hours a day, and I'm excited to share this personal interest or passion of mine. Like we had a European woman helping with babysitting in Bali, etc., even though she wasn't a nanny like Jari was, full-time with us. And even like teenagers of digital nomad families who are on the move, and that has happened more organically for us, where not on a paid basis, but where, a digital nomad family said, hey, why don't we go out to dinner? Oh, but, we don't have anyone to look after the kids. And they'll go, oh, so-and-so can. And we've had teenagers hang out with the kids. So likewise, what I shared at the very beginning about that flexibility of opening up those possible connections, the same happens with childcare. But it's been a huge benefit of me knowing, okay, if I sit down to work for an hour, I can pay to have someone helping us for a lot more hours than that. That has been absolutely game-changing. And it just takes all that compromise and negotiation factor out of who can do what at what time. Citizenship, the possibility of dual citizenship. So just briefly, this isn't something that we had researched beforehand, wouldn't even think about it. You hear growing up, okay, this person's got dual citizenship, one in, Canada, one in the States, or one in Australia, whatever it might be. But now that we have the ability for our children to learn to do this, have an online income as well, it's a freedom ticket. Right, so imagine having 2 countries where you can go in, visa-free, you can stay as long as you want, you don't need an onward flight, potentially even opening up visa-free travel to a broader range of countries, being able to set up a home base like Libby was talking about yesterday. So it's absolutely huge. So just Google that, research countries that grant citizenship by birth. I mentioned that to you because I never would have thought of it. I even didn't really think of it after Sean was born, and it wasn't until we were leaving Costa Rica and I had to sign some paperwork, I was realising, this is pretty cool. Like, he never has to do any application or, prove anything to have dual citizenship in Costa Rica and in Australia by descent. Of course, that's not the only variable, right? That's just one of the things, but I think it's something to just have in your back of your mind if you're in that scenario. And then fulfillment, so adventure, variety, flexibility, and an online income. And what that does as a family is I find that it allows you to really sidestep some of those, those common or usual sacrifices, the challenges of parenthood. So when you have that image of, the mum giving up her pursuits and her life to be behind the stove and, doing everything for their kids, or the image of the dad stuck in peak hour traffic just doing what he has to do to care for the family, when you bring in these factors, and particularly an online income and that flexibility, you bring about so many opportunities to work the variables in your favour. So for example, my husband and I, sometimes if I've got extra work on, he'll go, well, why don't you go stay in that hotel? That's fulfilling for me. I go and get some stuff done, then I come back to the family. If he wants to go to, the gym midday, I stop work to do it. Because you're able to blend everything in, there's less of this this competition in the family between the relationships, because one person's stuck out of the house for 16 hours a day, and then there's this limited time to get everyone what they need. And as well with the adventure and variety for the adults, the parents and the kids, is if there's a tough situation, if there's a challenge, okay, let's not get up and go to work, let's get up and go for a surf, or go to breakfast, or whatever it is, and let's work the variables in our favour and work through our challenges a bit more gracefully as a family, because we've got the resources and the flexibility to do so. So this is just one example of that. I know that I've shared some of the perks, but the reality is that the challenge still remains, fitting it all in. Business, building, client work, learning time, family hangout time, cooking, cleaning, all that type of thing. But this is just one example where I looked at this photo. We were actually going through a really challenging time when this photo was taken. You know, I had a lot of work on, you know, getting clients on board, I think maybe letting go of clients. I don't visualise the exact details, but just the emotional feeling, Dan as well, that this was a really hard time. Potentially Sean wasn't sleeping, he was unwell, whatever it is. Our car motor had blown up and we couldn't get around very easily. But because we were able to work the variables in our favour with time and mobility and flexibility, we made the best of it. And we would camp, well not camp, but set up a tent down by one of the beaches every day. We caught the bus down there. We left our things, you know, in a friend's cafe, etc. I would work in a cafe or I would work in a camp chair sitting there. You know, Dan remembers this being one of the best sunset surfs ever, he told me. And so even when we're going through these challenging times, whether that's through personal, health, business, whatever it is, we're able to, as a family, work that in our favour. And that was just such an emotional connection to that image, seeing it like that. And so what happens is that the Rubik's Cube of family life becomes solvable, basically. Not always solved, but constantly able to, you know, tweak the variables as something changes, as the family dynamics change. And, you know, here's what the coolest part is. I feel like the absolute coolest thing is, you know, a whole generation of kids growing up, seeing their parents, and not just their parents, but the other adults that are around them, right in the middle of living their dream or, you know, going after their dream. Or sometimes even, you know, collaborating with their friends on their dream, you know, seeing the adults collaborate on, you know, where their dreams intersect or what have you. And so, you know, by what we're able to model to them, basically this generation of kids are acquiring that belief that, okay, adulthood doesn't have to be this thing that you push against, that you have to escape from on weekends, that you have to get through, you know, soldier on. But it's actually, you know, it can be that continuation of that big adventure that they've already been living with you guys. And I think that's one of the most powerful things that we can pass on to them as parents.